Hi, I'm Dr. Jo Grace and I've been asked to provoke you, which is a bit of an odd request. The person who asked me was talking about equality, diversity and inclusion and reflecting that often disabled people are left out from these conversations. So I was thinking about exclusion. It is rarely an active thing, rather it's a consequence of inaction. We exclude those we've not met, haven't thought about, haven't seen, and people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities, profound and multiple learning disabilities, are a hidden population. They are marginalised and made vulnerable in multiple ways, and so they are people who get excluded a lot, not intentionally, just through lack of thought. And as we challenge prejudice, we do it by recognising the power we have and then using that power in action. So it's a process of do, think, and then do some more. And you're likely already on this journey because you're listening to me and you're likely already acting. So this is less of a provocation and more of an invitation to think more. Your own thoughts will provoke you to action far quicker than mine will. I understand a little bit about the consequences of not seeing people. You know, I am, as you can see, if you have visual capacity, I am a white woman. I'm so white that they don't make foundation pale enough for me. And I grew up in a very white area of the country. My friends, my teachers, my family are all white. And I don't think of myself as prejudice, but I'm I'm not so naive as to think that my not thinking I'm prejudiced makes it true. Whiteness is a clear power privilege, just the same as using mouth words is a power privilege. I didn't earn or ask for this power, but unless I act to equalise its distribution, then I am culpable of the harm created by power imbalances such as these. And I do try and act. So like I check the events that I speak at to make sure that they won't be all white events, and I would refuse to speak on platforms that aren't platforming people from global majority backgrounds. But a few years ago I was running a conference myself, and I only noticed when I put out the advertising material that I was running an all-white event, and that's that kind of invisibility I hadn't noticed because I have this position of power. And I ran another event and I tried to find somebody who to make it a not all-white event. I asked everybody I knew. I read the whole of LinkedIn from start to finish, and there wasn't anyone. And it would have been easy to say, oh, well, they don't exist, but there's another layer, isn't there? The next bit is to ask, why are they not here, and what am I doing to counter their absence? My event was related to disability, and disability is certainly not reserved for the white population, so you'd expect to see the same representation of different colours at a professional level as you see at the level of experiencing disability, and they're not there. So what am I doing to ensure that they're there in future? Yeah, that question is much harder to answer, and my answers are wholly inadequate. I've put on 3 events since that first one. All of them have had better representation, but not good representation. It's not been enough. My actions are nowhere near enough. They are inadequate, and I am resting on the laurels of that particular privilege. So I understand how these exclusions happen, and I am culpable within them. And people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities are often only at the edges of people's consideration. I've encountered offers that said they were inclusive of them, but only were really including people with severe learning disabilities or moderate learning disabilities. The profound learning disabilities is kind of not looked at. These are not people who just struggle to communicate in standardized forms or can make basic choices we're thinking about people who do not have cognitive capacity. And it's a weird thing, because to suggest thinking about these people is itself controversial. There are people who would say that to talk about these people in itself is a wrong, is a harm, is a threat to other people. You know, and if we think about it in our work, how are these people hidden in our work? They're hidden when we don't automatically consider them as a part of our inclusive provision. They're hidden when we offer some form of standardized form communication as an access point, you know, signs, symbols, choice boards, talking mats, you know, and call it an access point without recognizing that that's an access point for some people, not all people. They're hidden when we offer an activity to take part in, but actually they only are witness to that activity. So I get to cut something out with scissors whilst you sit next to me, or I get to bake a cake whilst you sit next to me. They are hidden when we make an activity contingent on having particular sensory systems, or being able to process the information from sensory systems, or to have an expectation, or to hold a memory. They are hidden when we host our events in places without changing places, toilets. They are hidden when we measure success of our work by what people learned. You know, have you got a measure for success that doesn't consider learning? They are hidden when we deem it necessary to exclude them because they cannot give informed consent. They are hidden when we remove them in order to protect them, when we only listen to proxy voices and don't try and hear directly from them, when we think of meaning existing in brains or in isolation. You know, do you recognize embodied meaning? Are you speaking to people who share meaning with people with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities? They're hidden when we talk about choice, because choice is contingent on cognitive ability. And they're hidden when we say everybody has a degree of capacity, or everybody can make progress, because such insistences are a denial of their being. Like, I've been told I shouldn't talk about them, that they don't exist, or that they exist in such small numbers that they ought not to be mentioned. I've been told, and I'm sure you have too, that you should always say everyone is capable, because if in the saying of it you rescue just one capable person from the indignity of being considered incapable, and not just the indignity, from the great injustice, because obviously if you have somebody with capacity whose capacity is being denied, that's a horrific thing. But the narrative is that if you rescue just one of those people, then it was worth it. And just, you know, consider that for a second. Imagine a real life scenario, and I'll do a dramatic one just to make my point. But say you have a class of 10 people, 9 of whom have no intellectual capacity and 1 of whom does. The argument is that by persisting as if everybody has capacity, that's the right thing to do, because that rescues that one capable person. But what of the other 9 who are denied by that persistence? You know, the numbers won't be like that, but even if it is just one person who is being denied by that persistence, then surely that is an injustice too. The argument that assumption of capacity is valid is deeply, deeply prejudiced. It's saying capacity is good, lack of it is bad. It should be ignored, you know. Prejudice against intelligence is the last acceptable form of prejudice we have in our society. There are people who do not have intellectual capacity, who will never have intellectual capacity. And that's not because people like me don't believe in them or don't provide them with the right opportunities. It's not for any reason of things being done to them or not done to them. It is their being. Being somebody who lacks intellectual capacity is entirely valid. It counts as a life. It's a worthwhile life. Assuming incapacity is wrong. Assuming capacity is wrong. We all know those little sayings about assumptions. It's the assuming that's the problem. If you're assuming anything in relation to people with profound disabilities, then you're creating a space for power imbalances to thrive in. What you want instead is curiosity and acceptance. You know, I accept you as you are, however you are, and I'm curious to find out who you are. You know, how does your work convey that message? How does your work recognise these people? It's tough, because that do, think, act cycle of countering prejudice always means that your best is not enough. Because you need your new best, the best that you'll think of after you've reflected this time. It's a movement, and you have to keep moving. It's never good enough. What in your offer is contingent upon some degree of intellectual capacity? I had a teacher at school who used to say, "This is not me, this is the house I live in." And he did it to save us from our teenage angst about our bodies. But if this is not me, what is me? You know, what is your definition of what your me is? And how does that apply to people with profound and multiple learning disabilities? How are you conceiving of what a person is? Is your concept of me a singular one? You know, what if identity isn't singular? What if it's shared? My research found people with profound and multiple learning disabilities experiencing shared being, not individual identity. What do you do to recognise people who lack intellectual capacity? And how do we progress this thinking together so that it's not a taboo to say that these people exist? And if I was sneaking one more little, you know, and I know I'm over time, but is it inclusion we're working to, or is it belonging? A sense of belonging for all.